Should I sell my home? That's a good question. What's your situation? Where are you going to go? Is your house ready? Is now a good time or later? What's the inventory like? We're going to answer all those questions for you right now. If you're getting to the point where you're starting to think about whether or not you should sell your home, there's a lot of things that you have to keep in mind. You might not have thought of any of these before because maybe you've had your home for like 40 years or 30 years or maybe 5 or 10 years, but there's a lot that you have to consider, and those are the type of things that we're going to go over. My name's James Jock, and I'm a full-time real estate associate broker with eXp Realty, and I work with sellers all the time to help them prepare to sell their house, to decide to sell their house or not even. But there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of things you have to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about that right now. The first thing that I wrote down, but what's your situation? That has a lot to do with whether or not now is a good time to sell your home or not, because it depends on your circumstance. Everybody's circumstance is different, and that's why I just wanted to point out that we need to talk about what the different circumstances are, because sometimes the circumstance can mean that maybe you have to sell or you don't have to sell, or maybe you need to do it sooner rather than later. But we want to factor all those in. So we're going to have a dialogue about what's your situation. That's usually one of the first things that I ask sellers when we sit down and have a consultation. Why are you moving? That's really what it comes down to. Why are you moving? I'm not asking that because, why are you moving? You shouldn't be moving. No, I'm asking that because the better I understand the circumstances, the better I can advise you on the things that you have to consider when responding to that circumstance. So one of the things, different circumstances, let's talk about those, right? Are you downsizing? It's funny because I meet with a lot of people who are downsizing just because the house is too big, maybe the kids are gone and the whole upstairs isn't used. So, they just want to get something a little bit more manageable, maybe a smaller yard, maybe without a pool. But downsizing, the hardest part of downsizing is going to a smaller house and not taking as much stuff with you. You may think that that's funny, but I've shown houses to people who are moving and downsizing. It's like, oh, this isn't as big as where we are now. It's like, you're downsizing. You may think that's funny, or maybe you don't think it's funny, but when you start to downsize, you've got to think about what you're doing with the stuff that you're downsizing. The things that, if you've lived in your home for 30 years, or even 20 years, or maybe 5 or 10, I don't know, but you have stuff that maybe you don't want to take with you. Your best bet is to get rid of that stuff before we even consider putting your home on the market. So maybe you're downsizing, maybe you're upsizing, maybe you're tired of the latest kid being on the side of your bed in a I've seen that too, in a pack and play or whatever. Maybe you've run out of rooms for all the room you need. So that's a different circumstance where when you're upsizing, we have to talk about, how long have you had your home? What's your equity position? How much do you owe? Because obviously you're not going to be able to move if the numbers aren't going to make sense when you talk to your bank, right? Because if you're selling your house, you've got to clear enough from that to go towards your next purchase. Even if you're just looking to spend maybe 15 or 20,000 more, knowing what your mortgage balance is and what's going to be the cost to sell your home, what's going to be the cost to buy another home. Those money numbers are something that we need to talk about. I'm not going to give them all to you, but what I'm going to do is make sure that we connect you with a lender who understands the ramifications of those numbers, right? Leave the real estate to realtors, leave the money people to money people, right? I've got great local lenders that I can connect you with. So maybe that's the situation with upsizing. I also see a lot of estate sales on the market. A lot of times it comes down to someone passed away, none of the kids need the house or want the house, and it's going to be sold. The decision's been to sell the house, mom and dad's house, the house we grew up in. There's a lot of emotions that go into that, and we're going to talk through the easiest way to do that and the best way that we can pull the most value from the property. In my experience with an estate sale, is that we clean out the house, we determine what's going to be done with all of mom and dad's things or whoever's things in the house, so that when we put it on the market, we've cleaned out we've cleaned up, and I can also refer local cleaners that'll go in and spick and span it for you. Um, and that's usually the best way to present the house to try and get the most value out of it, is a clean slate. Because if you don't, then what people do is they look at, oh my gosh, look at all the stuff in this house, and they don't see the bones of the house. They don't see, maybe the hardwood molding and just the little unique features about the house, because they can't see it through all the stuff that they have to look through. So that's why in an estate sale, I usually recommend that we clean it all out. Maybe your circumstance is um, that whoever bought the house are no longer together. When it comes down, maybe the circumstances, regardless of what it is that the people who bought the house are no longer the ones that are selling the house, or, have parted ways. In a case like that, it's always important that, when you work with a real estate salesperson like myself, is that everything is communicated to everybody. Because the last thing that you want is, well, they're only talking to this person and not me, and and that type of thing. And there are ways that I structure my communication so that everybody knows everything, and so that everything is clean and above board, just so that that doesn't add, another layer of complexity, because one person doesn't feel like, I gotta quiet my computer, like, you're not talking to me, you're talking to them. So that's another thing that factors into, the situation behind selling your house. And sometimes maybe one of the owners of the house in the splitting up wants to refinance and keep the house. Well, we can certainly talk about some different things that we can do to help that process along as well. Okay, so what's your situation? That was number one. The other thing that's really important is, where will you go, right? If you've been in this one house and this is the only house that you've had, you really need to get where you're going to go lined up. So we're going to have that discussion, because if we come on the market and we get a contract at whatever point, it could be anywhere from 45 to maybe 65 days in our market here to a closing date. So if we get a contract today, in 2 months, you got to be out of the house, right? So you need to factor in where you're going to go, because the last thing we want to do, well, can I stay an extra month or two? No, no, you can't. Because if somebody's buying their house, they want to be in their new house, new to them house, right? Some loans also require that buyer have occupancy within 60 days. So if you're going to ask for a lease back where you can stay longer than you should, that's going to complicate the sale. And a lot of times buyers won't even want to deal with it. They won't even want to get into that situation. So you need to have something lined up on where you're going to go. So we're going to have that discussion. We're going to talk about it. Are you going to rent somewhere? If so, are you on a list? Is there a list? Can you get on the list? You have to factor that in. Are you moving to a different area where you're going to rent? Then you need to reach out, obviously, on the other end and try and get something lined up so that you have an idea, how often do units come available? Is this going to be viable? Because the last thing you want to do is you've got a U-Haul packed up and you've got nowhere to go. The other option is, are you moving to a different area out of our local area, or out of our region, and then you're going to buy, on the other end? If that's the case, an important thing to remember is, you probably don't know a real estate agent on the other end. Because I've been in the industry for a long time, I can research and find somebody with experience on the other end, so you don't have to just try and figure it out by Googling online. You may get somebody with a great profile but has no experience. So I can help find somebody on that other end for you to partner with, so that we can do this whole thing together, so that when we sell the house here, you've got a transition plan with somebody who knows what's going on and is kept up to date with everything. So when you look at that, we're going to talk, when you look at moving, we're going to have a consult, and we're going to talk about, where are you going to go, right? What's your situation first? Why are you moving? Where are you going to go? Well, I don't know. It's like, well, if I don't know is the answer, we're going to have that frank conversation. The other part of that too is, depending on your financial situation, Do you need the proceeds from the sale of the house that we're selling in order to buy somewhere else? Some people do, some people don't, but that affects some of the timing. So knowing that and talking through that is going to give us a better situation. So number one, I know what issues are behind the scenes, and that information obviously is kept private between us. That's my responsibility to you. Like I said, the timing in a sale is important, so that's why we're gonna work through these things. We're gonna talk about if you need the proceeds. I'm also going to give you a cost estimate when we figure out the price of your home on here's what your estimated proceeds will be. That way you have information at least moving forward that you'll have an idea what amount of equity situation you're going to be in. So the other thing, should I sell my home? That's a big question. Is it a good time to sell? That's a really good question too. Is it winter now? Is it a good time to sell in winter? Is it a better time to sell in the spring or the summer or the fall? Talk to me, Jim, about what's going on, right? So let's talk about number one, it's always a good time to sell if that time meets with your plan or your why you have to move. What it comes down to is if the driveway is going to be snow plowed or shoveled anyway, why not list? One of the advantages that I tell sellers about selling their home in the winter is you have less competition. You have less other sellers on the market in the wintertime, which means, maybe they look at two houses and they like yours compared to the other one. Versus in the summertime, maybe they look at five and they keep picking another one, right? I always tell people, regardless of the house, now is always the right time if now is a time that works for you. If you're and again, we're in northern New York here, so we have winter, right? We have snow on the ground. But if you were a seller who goes to Florida for the winter, as an example, that's probably not the best time to sell because your house still needs to be accessible to buyers and people like that. Unless you've got someone who's snow blowing the driveway and shoveling up to the doorway, then we can do it while you're gone. That's no problem at all. But we just have to factor, is the house accessible in the wintertime if you're not here in the wintertime. The other part of is now a good time to sell is in our market here. I'm talking right now specifically to Clinton County, New York. We are still in a seller's market. This is March of 2023. Normally I don't put a date on my videos, but right now we are still in a seller's market. Well, what does that mean? A seller's market means that it's more advantageous for a seller to sell than a buyer to buy. The reason it's a seller's market is because there aren't as many homes in inventory that are on the market for buyers to look at. That means that anything that comes on the market is going to get more favorable attention because there's not a lot on the market. Conversely, if it was a buyer's market, that means that there's all kinds of listing and the buyers are pretty much in charge because maybe they're looking at 15 houses or 15 or 10 that they could look at. The more inventory they have to look at, the more it favors a buyer because they have more options. Okay. But right now we're still in a seller's market in Clinton County, New York. The other part of it is our inventory right now continues to be lower than desirable. How low? Well, it's low. So with that, there's less inventory, but it's still a seller's market, right? So the amount of homes on the market is still low, but that's still working for sellers. You all know that we had a crazy housing market in 2021 and part of 2022. Our market here in Clinton County changed about the second week, maybe the middle of August of 2022. How did it change? Well, it's no longer the crazy busy, prices are going up, they're going up double digits. That plane kind of was going like this and then it leveled off, right? So we're not seeing the large price increases in most price ranges like we did 2021, 2022. Well, what does that mean? That means that the prices are stabilizing, and even some of the houses that have closed since that price change, the values are starting to come down just a little bit. Well, what does that mean for you for a seller? That means that if you're super aspirational and maybe your market value is here, and it's like, well, let's try here because, the market's so crazy. Eh, I don't necessarily recommend that because there is a cooling of the market here. Um, I still look, every home that I price, and that's the hardest thing that I do. And the best thing that I do for you is price your home for the market today. I found the other day that some homes are about the same level as they were maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago. It's very specific to location, how the house and all the pieces and parts that go into pricing it. So we're going to look at that in particular. So when we sit across the table and we talk about, should I sell my home now? Is it a good time? And I ask you where you're going to go. We're going to talk through all this. We're going to talk about what our expectations should be, for the market that we're in today. We're not in the market a year ago. We're in the market today. So we have to look based on their most recent sales. What's it looking like the market's going to do? And then we have a conversation after I do my research about what the value looks like for your home on today's market. And then we talk about, how does that sound? What is that? How does that play into the timing and all the things that we talked about in our consult before? Those are the type of things that you really have to keep in mind. This kind of big picture on is it good for you? Is it how's the market? Also, it's important too. How's your house? Your house condition is important, and that affects value. When somebody goes to the bank to get a mortgage to buy a house, the bank wants to make sure that the value of the home is being preserved. Well, what does that mean? That means that the roof is good. If there's wood on the exterior, it's not peeling. There are handrails, there are safety things. They want to know when they do a bank appraisal that their value is being preserved by maintenance not being deferred. When they get a loan, there's certain loan types, like typically a government-backed loan wants to make sure that everything outside is all, there's no peeling paint, there's a decent roof that's got some life left on it. You'd be surprised the stories we could tell about that. But those things affect value, but they also affect the buyer's financing. If the buyer is getting a government-backed loan, like that means either a VA-backed loan, a USDA-backed loan, or an FHA-backed loan, they have specific home condition requirements that the home has to qualify for their type of financing. That's the fact of it. So when we list your house and we look around, we're going to talk about, maybe any deferred maintenance or if we were just to paint that one board up there, we wouldn't have any peeling paint anywhere on the property, and we'd be golden for pretty much any type of financing. Those are the type of things that we're going to talk about and talk through. And there's some different strategies that we can do, but we'll go into that a little bit more. So anyway, we've talked about, should you sell your home, and some of the things that factor into that. We've talked about what the market is doing, and if it's a good time of year to buy. It's always a good time of year to buy, or to sell rather. We've also talked about your home condition. So all of these things go into helping me work with you and deciding if this is the best time for you. In the market that we are right now, the longer you wait to decide in a declining market could mean that you could get less for your home farther down the road than you would get for it now. And we'll have that conversation as well. If I can help you with any of these things that we've talked about, you can contact me through the video below, the contact information on this platform. And I would be more than happy to help you sell your home, or to find someone at the other end for you to sell your home. So feel free to reach out. Let's have a conversation. And until the next video, we'll see you soon.